Thank you. My name is Matt Webb. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the RTA. It's a pleasure to have all of you here today. Joining me today is giving this presentation will be a colleague of mine, Carly Shapiro, and then Ben Stuka is our planner from the RTA, and so all three of us will be available for comment afterwards. So this is a public meeting on the proposed Connect Southeast Michigan transit vision that has been rolled out. Before we get into that, I'd like to take a few minutes and do an overview of the RTA. How many are familiar with the RTA and the functions? About 3/4 of the room, so bear with me a couple minutes for those that are new. But so the RTA is about 6 years old. We were created back in 2012. We have a board that is made up of representatives from Washtenaw, Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb, and the city of Detroit. We're 9 voting members, and then we have 1 non-voting member who's our chair, and he's appointed by the governor. So we have a couple of core functions that we are required to do by our enabling statute. And really it's more of a coordinating and planning and visioning agency as opposed to running the day-to-day service that some or all of you may use from a transit perspective. 2 key ones that sort of frame the discussion of why we're here today. The first one is the RTA is required by statute to develop the region's master transit plan. We developed that first one and it was adopted by the board in 2016. And then the other thing that the enabling statute allows the RTA to do is to implement either property millage or motor vehicle registration in order to implement the master plan. And so we did attempt to do that in 2016 and just narrowly failed. Okay, that doesn't work, by the way. So our mission at the RTA is to manage and secure transportation resources for the region that will significantly do 3 things. The first one is to enhance mobility options. Second one is to improve the quality of life for all of our residents. And the third one is to increase economic vitality for the region and make our region more competitive from an economic standpoint. So to do that, again, we develop and identify, sort of set that vision for transit across the region. We administer several regional programs meant to coordinate with the providers, and then we coordinate with them on a very regular basis. So many of you already know this, but for those that don't, just an overview. So our region has 5 transit providers. DDOT, which provides transit service within the city and some neighboring communities. They do both fixed route as well as on-demand services, specialized services for folks with disabilities and special needs. SMART does the same thing, except they cover Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb, and they provide service across each of those jurisdictions as well as then into the city of Detroit. They also provide the specialized services, and they have even expanded services for the commuters, the Smart Connector program, if those of you who are familiar use that. The RIDE provides services in Washtenaw County. And then the last 2, the People Mover, which is the downtown circulator, and then the Q line, which is our newest provider, operates the streetcar line. So all 5 of those agencies have functions that, on the right-hand side, you see that they are the agencies that operate the service. They will own and maintain the service. They collect and keep the fares to run the service. And then they do participate and we do coordinate with them for regional activities. All the things that they do today and I will say that they provide great service across our region with the dollars that are made available to them. They would continue to provide those services under this plan. So there's some general framework that I want to make sure that everybody walks out of this room. The RTA is not looking to become a new operator. We're not looking to take services away from SMART or DDOT or the RIDE, but we're looking to coordinate and bring more resources to the region so that they can provide additional services. So a little bit more background about how we got here tonight. So after the narrow defeat in 2016, the RTA, the board and the staff went out and did some listening and tried to assess why the 2016 ballot initiative was defeated. Several things that we learned. And then we also went and started talking with our elected leadership across the 4 counties. Met with a lot of stakeholders, and what has come out of that is this new Connect Southeast Michigan vision. And so at our March board meeting, Executive Warren Evans presented that new vision to the RTA board. The RTA board considered that, and then actually just last week, the board recommended that we release that for public comment. And so really the purpose tonight is to get your feedback and comments on the plan. So we'll go through a presentation, we'll talk about what's in the plan. After we're done, there's comment cards on the sheet. There'll be people collecting those cards, so bring them up to me, I'll read the question. We'd like to do that, one, so we can document the questions that we receive in the comments, as well as I'll read them so everybody can hear the questions that have been raised. So what did we hear in based on why the 2016 referendum failed? Many different thoughts from many different people, but these 4 points generally capture the key themes, and that's the 2016 plan was too capital focused, meaning that we had some large BRT, bus rapid transit corridors in there, required a lot of money to build, and then a lot of money to maintain. What we heard loud and clear was that this region needs more service across more routes for more people to connect communities, and not necessarily just focusing on 3 or 4 key corridors. So Carly will come up and talk about what's in the plan, but that was a key focus. The second key message we heard was more local control. The 2016 plan was a bit unclear about who was going to provide these services, and so in coordination with the leaders from the counties, the mayor, as well as the providers, this is much more clear that the existing providers are going to be providing this types of service. They have the relationships, they know how to run the transit services, and so that is something that there's much more local control built into this new plan. Taxpayer benefit for those areas not getting fixed route service. As I said before, the original plan was focused in a dense area. As you see in your exhibits, we have an area now called hometown service. So that hometown service is an area that doesn't necessarily get direct fixed route service as part of this new plan. But what they do get is annual money. All those communities, and there's 60 plus communities, get a portion of the millage money that will get raised annually to operate services that best meet their own communities. So some communities run senior citizens shuttles. Some communities need more money to run paratransit service. Some communities have a community shopping circulator. That's a priority for them for economic development purposes. All those things, we've gone out and met with those communities, and we've heard transit's important, and these are the types of things that we would like to do if we get more money. And so that's what that hometown service is, and that was something that certainly was not in the 2016 plan. Finally, the last thing we heard was the 2016 plan is focused on the state of the industry, the state of transit practice in 2016. This is a 20-year plan. You don't know what's going to happen when we talk about the future of transportation. What about autonomous vehicles that everyone's hearing about? And that plan was silent to that technology. So what this does is it sets money aside for annually the counties to prepare and distribute funds to whatever technology may look like as we move forward in the future. So, 10 years from now, the way we move up and down Woodward Avenue may be totally different. This has money to not only plan for us to be ready for that type of new technology, but then also to operate and do some grants and special funding. Just like the auto industry is leaders here in Southeast Michigan on the autonomous vehicle front, this money allows some seed money to be for the transit side as well. So what you're going to hear, Carly's going to come up and do an overview of the plan. There's 4 principles that this plan was built upon. Improve the frequency and reliability, modernize and provide innovation within our transit system, local input for expanded local services, again being more responsive to local needs, and finally that seamless rider experience, being able to commute across the entire region regardless of who's providing the underlying service to increase the rider experience moving across the region. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carly and she'll review what's all included in the plan.
So, I'm here to talk about the Connect Southeast Michigan plan, the proposed plan. And if you have the tablet and you open it up, there's a map in the middle. I'm going to break down that map. We're going to talk about the different sections and what they cover and what they offer. So, as Matt mentioned, the plan offers more service in more places, more flexibility, more local control, we'll talk about that, funding for innovation, a seamless experience, and more money for operations. So more money to connect people with transit. So the 15 routes at 15-minute frequencies. So these are 15 routes that offer transit at 15-minute frequencies during peak service. So that's 1,400 more hours per weekday and a 62% increase in frequency, which is really important for our region. People need to be able to get around and they need to be able to get there on time. So the 5 premium routes, which are going to be these double line routes, run along Michigan, Gratiot, and Woodward. And then there are 2 new routes that will be getting 1-seat rides, which is part of the seamless experience. So that means no transfers at 8 Mile, and those are on Mound and Van Dyke, and then Grand River going all the way out to Novi. And then the 10 high-frequency corridors operate at up to over 20 hours a day at 15-minute frequencies during rush hour. Next, we are going to talk about the Airport Express services and the Commuter Express services. So 40% of people in Metro Detroit cross a county line or a city border or a city of Detroit border to get to work. So we are regional. We're working in different townships, we're working in different counties. Not many people stay within their own community and accomplish all the things they need to do in a day. We're all moving across the region. And so it's that sense of regionalism that has really pushed some of these routes. So the Airport Express, there's currently a route that runs from Ann Arbor to the airport. We're adding 3 new routes along I-275, M39, and I-94. And those are going to be the solid color routes that have the little airplane on them. And then another thing that we heard that's really important is that we need to connect people to jobs. I hear this all the time from people who, employers, and people who are trying to place talent in new jobs. We have a lot of talent, and one thing that will hold us back as a region is if we can't bring talent to jobs. That's how we're going to be able to grow. So we've added 11 new routes. And the Airport Express services and the Commuter Express services are all accompanied by parking routes. So you can park your car and you can hop on the bus and you can take it somewhere across the region to get to your job. Alright. Another connector is the commuter rail. So that's going to be that dark green line that runs from Ann Arbor to Detroit. It's going to stop in Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, Wayne, Dearborn, and then New Center in Detroit. It'll be 8 round trips per day, and it's accompanied by 2 complimentary feeder bus routes in Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti that will help move people to the stations. The Q line is a streetcar that operates in downtown Detroit. It runs from downtown to New Center, and the RTA will assume operations of that in 2027. That's been a part of the plan all along, and that has stayed with the Connect Southeast Michigan plan. And then there's some additional new local bus routes, which are the pink lines, Ypsilanti to Livonia and Ypsilanti to Marion. So the next part of the plan that I'm going to break down are community and regional initiatives that have been put in to help better connect people who can't necessarily hop on the fixed route line or need that additional first mile, last mile connection. So when we heard that there needed to be more local control, that plays out in the core area flexible mobility and the next 2 programs that I'll talk about. So the core area flexible mobility, and I encourage you as you look at this to, as we're building this map, this is a part of the map, so it's about what's inclusive, not what's exclusive. We're building the full program here. So in this light gray area, these are communities that are served by fixed route. And what that means is there's a bus route or a rail route that is running through the community. And so as part of that, this funding, so it's $20 million annually, can be used to fund paratransit, senior mobility, and that first mile, last mile connectivity. And this is about enhancing the transit services that currently exist, so creating those extra connections. Sorry. And then hometown service, so as I talk about building on the map, there's a lot of communities that don't get fixed route service. And there's a lot of reasons for that, whether they are supported by the density in the areas, but a lot of these communities, as Matt mentioned, already have some kind of transit service. They're helping move their seniors around, they're moving people through university, downtown connections, and the money in the hometown service can be used for community design services. So they'll be locally controlled, and the community will be able to decide what is going to best serve our population. Because not every community, there's over 230 communities in our region, and not everyone needs the same thing. Not everyone has the same kind of population that makes it up. So in the hometown service area alone, the population of people 65 and older will increase by 140% in the next 25 years. And as a region as a whole, that's a trend we're seeing, is that population is getting older. So these services, for example, call and ride, ride sharing, so that's Uber and Lyft, partnerships with universities, office parks, so more job connectivity. It could be between communities. There's a lot of creative mobility solutions and innovation that this program can be used for. And then the third program I'm going to talk about that has a lot of local control is the Advanced Mobility Program. And Matt had mentioned this and how important it is for our region to stay on the leading edge of technology. So we kind of come at this from 2 sides, one where we need to catch up and one where we want to stay ahead. And Southeast Michigan, with the big automakers and universities, we're known for mobility solutions, and we're known for being on that cutting edge of technology. So the Advanced Mobility Program allows us to invest in innovation and to leverage private sector investment. And the private sector has some advantages that we'll be able to be a part of and work with them as the technology is changing. And this includes autonomous and connected vehicles, rideshare, transit-supported infrastructure. So the future of transportation looks like buses talking to cars and talking to pedestrians and helping all of these pieces work in sync, and that's a part of this plan. So as we look to the future, this money will help us stay relevant and keep up and get ahead. Okay, and then the last part of the program, when we look at the region, there are things that we can do to improve the efficiency of our transit system. So we talk about choke points. I'm talking about conditions that cause slowdowns, and that covers a broad range of topics. So what slows you down when you're getting on the bus? Is that the line of 10 people who have to, buy their fare? Is it the lack of a universal fare card? So one card or one system that unites them all. So reducing choke points means being able to create a more seamless experience and a faster, more efficient service. So for example, the $25 million annually for infrastructure upgrades, signal priority, and what that means is as a bus approaches or a form of transit approaches a light, it lets it know, hey, I'm here, and it will jump priority and change the light to green from red. And so one example of that is we'll be able to invest in about 100 intersections per year with this money, 100 choke points. There's also funding included for new and upgraded bus garages, so supporting the existing infrastructure of the providers. I mentioned before the fare integration program and the universal fare card. So this could be a mobile app. It'll be compatible with all services, so you'll have one fare or one system that you're paying to get across the region. So that can mean you go from ride share, so you can use it on the lift, and then you can get on the bus, and then you can get on the queue line, and it'll all be under one system, and you'll be able to connect it to your bank account or however the logistics of that work out, creating a more seamless experience, which we had mentioned earlier. And then again, to stay current and to look for future transportation needs, there's money for planning and design in the plan for such as light rail to the airport or streetcar expansions or expanding commuter rail service. The last thing I'm going to talk about is the dollars and cents of the plan. And one thing that's built into the legislation that enabled the RTA is that every county has to get back 85% of the money it invested, so 85% of the millage funds. And this is a breakdown of what's invested, what the return is, the expenditures, and at the end of the day, every county will be getting more than 85% back, more than what they invested in the plan. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Matt. Thanks.
Thanks, Carly. So we get this question a lot. Why now? Why are we coming back? Is it solely only because of we have an opportunity to do a referendum? The answer is no. There's reason to act now to update the existing plan. We learned a lot of lessons, and what we believe is presented before you today, we think is a tremendous improvement in the feedback that we've received. So, as you heard Carly said, our region is aging. We need additional mobility options, not only to move to different areas around the work, but also to provide improved quality of service. And so this really gets back to the RTA's core mission and our mission statement, and so that's to provide additional mobility services, not only to seniors, but also to millennials. As Carly said, we're seeing more and more of our millennials, a trend that's staying within the state, staying within the region. That's a great thing. But millennials, I have one of them who's just turned driving age. He has no interest in driving. he has more interest in playing with technology and worrying about other people getting them spot to spot, location to location. That's a trend that we've heard loud and clear. Millennials, stat from a recent Crane survey, 73% would rather leave their keys on the table and take other modes of transportation. Our region, needs to take a close look at that. And then finally, the autonomous vehicle trend, the way we move, both goods and services, but more importantly, people across our region, that is changing. So from an economic development standpoint, is our region ready to address those three trends? I think the Amazon proposal that came out answered that loud and clear, that no, we're not one of the top 25 regions. As you see in here on the screen, these are the 25 regions investment transit dollar per capita. We're at the very bottom end with this proposed plan. Full implementation of the plan gets us more to the middle of the pack, but everybody else is also moving and investing in transit. Transit is an economic development catalyst, and so it's something that at least one measure, one recent measure on the barometer for economic development, we sort of heard loud and clear that our region does need more mass transit options. So with that, one of the questions we heard is sort of what's next, what needs to happen for this plan to move forward. So the first thing that we're doing, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, for those that were not in the room yet, this is a listening session. We want to hear your feedback and comments, and we'll start that here in a few minutes on the plan. Where you have the next several weeks opening for comment, and then the board is required to do two things, two steps in order to get a ballot initiative on November's election ballot. The first thing is the plan needs to be approved, and so the steps that need to go through, we have at the RTA several committees. We have a planning and services coordination committee, a budget and finance committee. Both of them need to take a look at it and make sure that they are comfortable. They will also be hearing all the feedback that we receive over the next 2 weeks. And so if they say it's okay, they'll move it on to finance and allocation committee. That's a committee that's been established by bylaws, that's required. It has one member from each of our member jurisdictions. Requires a unanimous vote to move the plan forward, and then ultimately the full board will have an opportunity to say, yes, this plan looks like the right fit, addresses the right needs for the next 20 years, and we'll update the existing plan. If they do that, then the ballot initiative is a second one, and that's just one of the tools that we have to implement the master plan, and so it sort of follows the same steps. So we want to hear your input. I've done enough talking. I won't speak for Carly, but we definitely want to hear your feedback here tonight. As I said at the beginning of the meeting, Elnora Estelle raise your hand, Elnora. She'll be collecting cards. She'll hand them up to me. I'll read them so everybody can hear the questions. That allows us to also document all the comments that we received tonight and throughout the public comment period. Your feedback will be documented. It will be incorporated into a document that ultimately supports the full plan document. The other thing I want to sort of highlight that's included in your materials, we do have an online survey. We have a website. If you go to RTA, our website, rtamichigan.org, you can take that survey there. There's also a lot more information supporting documentation on the Connect Southeast Michigan plan. So, good.
Any others?
Sure. Yep.
Really, just talk about the new funding.
Yep. Okay, so I'm going to go through with the. We'll go ahead with the first question. How will those with handicap needs be accommodated? So the plan does accommodate for providing flexible funds both in the core and the hometown service area that provides ADA and paratransit service. Both VDOT, SMART, the RIDE, they provide that service today. By law, any time that we increase the amount of direct service that's provided, we need to match that with the corresponding amount of availability for paratransit service. So this plan does do that. It also provides, as part of that flexible money, both in the core area as well as the hometown service. If that's a priority for those local communities, they can use that money on those types of services. This should work if you guys can pass back and forth. Sorry about that. I'm going to call the millennial up to the podium. While Carly's doing that, the next question is, are you considering alternative renewable fuels? So this plan builds on the existing services provided by the SMART, VDOT, and RIDE. Certainly, as they evaluate alternative modes, it's certainly something that would be eligible for funding. Ben, I don't know if there's anything else from the existing provider standpoint. Ben Stuka is the RTA's planning director, provides planning services.
Can you hear me if I just speak up? Is that okay? All right. The bulk of the providers did work with and include some hybrid buses, hybrid diesel buses in their fleet. Ann Arbor, I think, has the largest amount, and just over 50% of their fleet. As that technology has kind of faded out, actually clean diesel buses have ended up being a little bit of a better investment. So we started with that as a baseline. We certainly had conversations with the providers about compressed natural gas buses, which requires a pretty large capital investment in terms of facilities, fueling facilities, and your maintenance facilities. One of the things we're hoping for out of the Advanced Mobility program is to look at how we can do pilots of electric, potentially electric buses, battery-powered buses. So while we don't have it explicitly as part of the program, we're certainly looking at that and seeing how that trend takes place is advanced in other transit properties throughout the United States.
Thanks, Ben. The next question, where are routes for Canton, the Ford Road, Livonia, Plymouth Road, Rochester, Rochester Hills? How are you filling the vacancies that SMART isn't filling in, not shown? Where are they? Your routes do not connect to job centers that SMART currently does not fill. So why is this better? And then finally, the plan does not provide better access to jobs. So I will start, and maybe Ben or Carly, you want to build on that. So first of all, the service is built on the existing SMART service. So some of those areas, not necessarily Canton, Livonia, Rochester, Rochester Hills, but it builds upon the existing SMART and VDOT network for employment access. We do have several routes specifically running through Canton, Livonia, and Rochester, Rochester Hills. Actually, I will go back the Commuter Express. So you can see on the screen, yeah, thank you. Yeah, so we do have specific routes, Commuter Express, and then coupled with, some of the more frequent service, we do hit on a lot of the region. The other thing that is available is, for that core, the core area, we do have some flexible funds. So if there's new job creation in those communities, that's certainly something where we do have eligible funding to come forward and program for future needs. So this is a good comment. This is kind of stuff that we are looking to receive about the overall plan and the routes that are included. More local control. What is the cost for a local community to run their own program? What about communities that don't want to run their own program? What happens to that money? Will the money communities get have to include their vehicles, or will communities have to use their own money? All money needs to be used for transportation, correct? And who will help communities design their program? So I'm going to go from the bottom up. So yes, all money has to be used for transportation purposes. There is language in our enabling statute that requires, what those purposes are. We can't collect a millage and then use it for education purposes, for example. So who will help communities design their program? One of the core functions of the RTA, working with the providers, is to educate across our region about the importance of transit, as well as what types of transit services might work best for communities. And so that's one of the things that is envisioned that, the RTA, the existing providers, if additional resources are provided, they'd be happy to come and meet with individual communities and say, what does transit look like within your community? How can we design a program within the available additional resources that are provided? So that would definitely be something that if master plan's approved, we get additional resources, that would be something that could be looked at. What about communities that don't want to run their own program? What happens to this? One of the other things that is envisioned, partnership and collaboration. Certainly with additional resources comes the opportunity to bundle services and some of those hometown services. A lot of those areas within our region operate either by volunteer services now. Townships provide some of those services out of their own operating budget. Those are opportunities that if there was a collective hometown type program, some of those more less urbanized areas of our region could come together and work to do a cooperative program. Ben, I don't know if there's anything you want to mention.
Yeah, I would say, so we've had the opportunity to have individual meetings with about 12 to 15 communities, specifically in Oakland County so far, in the hometown service area. And a few of the communities in the northern, what I would call the northeastern part of Oakland, so Orion, Addison, and Oxford Township already jointly operate their own services called NODA, the North Oakland Transportation Authority. They're beginning to have conversations with Oakland Township and the people who run their senior services, which is actually the Older Persons Commission out of Rochester, about how do they partner. So they're already having those conversations today. We had similar conversations with White Lake, Commerce, and Highland Township. They're all separately running services. Actually, I think White Lake and Commerce run their own service together. They're also working with Walled Lake and talking about how do they start. So everybody running their own services, how do they work together? And in fact, right now the way they're doing things is if the White Lake bus breaks down, they'll call Highland Township and say, hey, can you come and pick up this person for me? And they just kind of do it for each other. Not everyone works like that. So we're already seeing those opportunities for collaboration. We're having these conversations.
Thank you. More local, that was one I just read. What are the provisions made for urban communities currently opt-ins to SMART decide to opt out. Did you see the article Jerry Poisson, Deputy Oakland County Executive, wrote responding to Andy Meisner's support? He stated the investment really isn't an investment because while communities will play so much in villages, the money they got back is considerably less compared to what they pay. So a couple of things with this question. So the RTA's enabling legislation does not allow for opt-out communities. That's something that when putting together this plan, we needed to be responsive to our enabling legislation. So that is what this plan does. Certainly, I will say that this team has worked with Jerry Poisson. Jerry Poisson has helped take the RTA and meet with local communities. The area that is shown in gray there, I think there's agreement that that is sort of our core transit need and our core transit focus area. And it's the entire region as a whole is over 2,700 square miles. Trying to provide transit for that type of area, there's states larger than 2,700 square miles. So the area that we're trying to do, obviously a one-size-fit solution doesn't work, but we have to be responsive and be responsive to what the tools that we have in front of us and with the enabling legislation. Where's the financial breakdown spreadsheet that gives the dollar amounts and where they will be spent? Explain what you'll be doing to create the connectors, first mile, last mile, ADA, etc. So the operating costs information was overviewed in this. So in this slide, it provides a high-level overview. And this is, again, for the 1.5 mil option. So as you can see, the total investment requires, a commitment from all the communities. We can provide additional information and breakdown on that, but what we've had to do, as Carly indicated, is we had to be responsive to the 85%. So each of the 8 counties has to get 85% in return. We have done that with the millage dollars. The other sources of revenue for this plan are federal and state dollars. This plan reduces the reliance. One of the things the 2016 plan relied heavily on was some federal discretionary dollars to fund those big capital projects. Because we eliminated those from this version of the plan, more of this plan is built on funded from existing village dollars, state dollars, and federal formula dollars. And so, as you can see the breakdown, everybody through every county gets the 85% return, and then also gets at least 100% return investment when you look at the additional federal, state, and then also the revenue captured from fares as well.
Can I give you a card?
I already wrote a card.
Oh, okay.
I'm just curious how that 85% is going to be audited. What are the true ups for each county? Because I noticed in your PowerPoint, the box that was for 85% compliance was not the same color as the other boxes, so I'm curious what that means.
Sure.
And for full disclosure, my name is Phil Bertolini. I'm the Deputy County Executive for Oakland County. I'd be happy to.
Thank you and welcome. Yeah, thank you. That was an oversight. So the 85% compliance, the reason that is shaded gray is because right now, that's not a function that the RTA performs. And so everything on the left is the role of the RTA. If we were to get approval on a referendum, the RTA is required to assure each of the member communities that they are getting 85% return on their dollar. And so the RTA has taken and worked as part of the 2016 in doing developing some policy and looking at how that would be both implemented and then compliance. That would be looked at, Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, it would be on an annual basis?
So yeah, the policy, we developed and adopted a policy in, I believe it was September of 2016, which was right before the November ballot, focused exactly on 85%. How do we ensure this? How do we manage it going forward? Because right now we're dealing with projections. I think they're good and conservative projections, but when actual revenues come in, what do we do? So we developed kind of a two-part approach. One was on an annual basis when we actually receive revenues. We look at what did we project? Are we, did we hit our target? Are we above? Are we below? We basically make an adjustment at that point. We don't yet make an adjustment to the plan because if we're changing things every year, we wouldn't really be able to get much done. We developed a secondary system that banked those for about 3 years, if I remember correctly, and I don't have it right in front of me. And then every 3 years, we would address the plan itself and say, okay, Oakland County's revenues, we undershot them drastically. But I don't think we did, but let's say we did, or any other counties. Now let's actually adjust the plan to ensure that 85% compliance. There's a little bit more to it than that, but that's basically what we've established is kind of we annually look at it, do it through our reporting, and every 3 years we actually physically change the plan. So if it's like, we're not gonna make it the way the plan's designed, we'll change it and add more service to whatever county.
Okay, may you give us RTA board members contact information so we may contact them directly. If you send your email in through the available mediums on our website, they will definitely get that information. Which is cheaper, the high-frequency bus routes or the rail line? Presumably it is the bus line, so why isn't the Ann Arbor to Detroit rail line, why isn't that a bus? So that response is yes, that is correct. Bus service is more affordable to run and operate than fixed rail service. But the commuter rail option has been something that's been in the works and is a priority for Washtenaw as a member community. And so it's something that has long been a region planning project. And so that has been incorporated into the plan. I can say that, it does take time, as demonstrated by the Q line project, to get a commuter rail project up and running. One of the things that's included in this plan is commuter bus rail type, commuter bus service that would operate between Ann Arbor to Detroit and provide that service in the interim until that commuter rail service is up and running. Follow-up, why isn't the rail line from Pontiac to Detroit Metro serves more people? Excellent comment, question. That was looked at. That's been a historical service. And so we will obviously take that under consideration. There's been a lot of history there. The Ann Arbor, or the Amtrak line runs from Pontiac down to the News Center area, out along the same line as what the Ann Arbor to Detroit commuter line is proposed. There is no connection, however, down to Metro Airport. That was evaluated as sort of some of the feedback. A lot of challenges with that. Primarily, there is no rail line down, so there's a lot of property acquisition, which leads to a lot of costs. And then you also have the question and dilemma of how do you connect the terminals on the airport property with a commuter type service. So a lot of technical and cost and feasibility issues that sort of ruled that out, but that was something that looks at. What happens if RTA millage passes but SMART one fails? So that would be, from the RTA's perspective, a very bad day. This plan doesn't exist without SMART service, and I can't say that strong enough. The RTA will come out and I'm sure will be supportive of the SMART millage and the great services that SMART provides. Again, it was said best by Robert Kramer with SMART, is you can't have, can't spell SMART without RTA, and you can't have RTA without SMART. So that definitely is something that needs to happen. Why should taxpayers buy the queue line when we were not included in this design? So the plan does include, assume the operations of queue line in 2027, and I don't have any further comment on that. Is expansion of the queue line a possibility? As Carly mentioned, there is planning funds in there to look at potential extensions of the streetcar line, as well as potential future light rail transit line to the airport. These are types of projects that take many, many, many years to implement, and so planning funds to look at, cost, feasibility. These are the sort of things that, frankly, our competitors, our other regions are doing, and so there is a small amount of money in the plan to take a look at what would be needed. There is no money in the plan to do capital or operations, just to look at more planning and feasibility. Who would be the provider, SMART VDOT, for the queue line when the RTA takes over operation? Those discussions haven't taken place. It would just, the plan assumes money in there to fund the operations. All right, multiple part question here. The Connect Southeast Michigan proposal is a plan to create a plan. How can the people of Oakland County vote on a quasi-plan without a clear financial forecast? So additional details can be provided on the financial forecast. What I can say is that this plan was built similarly to 2006 on a robust financial model. That model has been reviewed by the many region leaders. We sat down and reviewed that with the providers to make sure that it was reviewed and any major assumptions or concerns in that model. And so that financial forecast and considerations will also be reviewed by the board over the next several weeks. And so that will be evaluated very closely. Please explain the 85% to 15% issue. Are we to understand that 15% of our funds will be spent elsewhere for train between Detroit and Ann Arbor? So the 85% is a requirement that those funds be collected for the millage, stay within that community. I think we talked about that. The remaining funds, frankly, a lot of that 85%, the way we've calculated 85% is it stays within that member jurisdiction. But you can't have a Woodward line that stops at 8 Mile and then turns around and goes back to Pontiac. That Woodward line, so there's, for example, the Oakland County, the additional 15% is spent in Detroit that takes those services down to the city of Detroit and back to Pontiac, and so it is spread across the region. We also have regional services, so stuff like the fare collection or the one stop, one call, the integrated fare system where you have one pass and you can travel across the entire region. not multiple cards, depending on whose service that you're using. Mobility improvements, all these things collectively, we're working together to provide as one region, not necessarily one member versus another. We talked about the others. This appears to be a partial plan. It is ill-advised to push a plan forward until it is complete. A voting loss now will delay rapid transit for years. What is the rush? So I will respond to that twofold. First of all, the plan and the vote are separate. And so I know from the RTA's perspective, what we heard and learned through that listening session on this plan, the plan is greatly improved. And so I'd ask folks to take a look at this and try to, as much as you can, separate the two. Is this a vision for the region that we can all get behind? Now, whether the funding mechanism is the right question, again, that's a two-part process. And there may not be the right time, right funding mechanism to fund that. And so, I'd ask folks to give feedback on the plan, and then also with the village request as sort of the implementation arm of the plan. Second part question, do not rely on property tax alone. Too many property owners will vote no because they cannot benefit from the statement above. Yeah, I agree that it would be great to have more tools in our toolbox to implement the existing plan that we have, this revised plan, as something that it needs to be a continued conversation. So, how much is each county expected to pay through property taxes proposed? So this is the mill would be 1.5 across all property owners. What about DDOT legacy and pension costs? So DDOT legacy and pension costs are not included in this plan. Again, DDOT will continue to operate their service. They will continue to bear their both their current operating services. This is above and beyond the services that are being provided by DDOT. So there is no funds in here to retire any of the DDOT pension or legacy funds. Will RTA look at extending the 12-mile route to the park and ride lot at 12 Mile and Beck Road in Novi? Ben or Carly?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that's exactly the kind of comment we need. So as long as we have it written, we'll look at it and see if we can test it in the financial model.
That's from actually Andrew Much, a council member from the city of Novi. So
Yes.
Thank you. I should say to all elected officials in the room, if we have any, can I see a hand? Thank you for coming out. We appreciate your attendance tonight. And if there's anything that the RTA can do.
Can I ask a question? So I wrote the question about the SMART. If the opt-in community, if you're going to extend the service into an opt-out community, that presents a real problem for the communities that are opted into SMART. And I've been told point blank, they're going to back out. So what provisions has the RTA plan made to address those funds that SMART will lose, or the RTA plan will lose, when a bunch of opt-in communities opt out?
So that's an excellent point. And so this plan, that's the type of feedback we need. We have not made any provisions yet.
That was a big problem in the 2016 plan. I'm curious why it wasn't even addressed in the 2018 plan.
Yeah.
So because of that, you want me to vote for your plan, and you haven't addressed the issues that were brought up in 2016.
Okay, thank you. Will RTA be doing presentations in local communities on the proposed plans and how it benefits local communities? So Yes, we have been, and I'll let Ben sort of summarize those presentations and listening sessions that we've already had.
Sure. So like I said, we, at the beginning of this process, so in January, we met with the county and city leadership, and we asked, what do you want to do in terms of us being able to talk to local leadership. Oakland County really took up that task and has provided their own staff as a liaison to help us kind of meet with those local communities. We've had some good meetings with Washtenaw County staff, some higher level meetings with Macomb County and certainly the city of Detroit. We're looking for any communities we haven't been able to go and meet with their staff. We'd like to go and be able to do that. So like I said, we've had probably a dozen to 15 meetings. Some have been multiple presentations to multiple government agencies. So we're always looking for those opportunities to have small one-on-one conversations just so we can really get into the details.
All right, next question. Can RTA start negotiating with lot owners to secure parking right sites? Not yet. So first thing is we have to have the plan adopted, and that this is the right vision for the region. How can RTA leverage economic impact of transit-oriented development fund part of the plan? So that's an excellent question. And we are working with our providers. We'll actually be doing a study coming out later this year, working in partnership with SMART and their fast service on Woodward, as well as Michigan Avenue service, to look at how potentially long-term TOD and connecting the transportation and land use priorities. So one of the things that certainly, if this is the right vision, we will want to start looking at those opportunities. What fare did you use in the model for airport and Ann Arbor to Detroit rail rides?
That's a good question. Ann Arbor, let's see. Airport, we use the air ride model. So Ann Arbor has an existing airport connector service. I believe their fares are, I'm not going to remember, so I don't want to say it. I can't remember exactly what it is, but we do, is it $12?
I think it's $12.
Yeah, $12 round trip. So those are for the air ride services. And then we didn't model a base fare for the commuter rail. I believe what we ended up doing was doing like a 20% fare box recovery. Which is actually a very, very conservative assumption of fare box recovery with a commuter rail system. So we made a fairly conservative estimate. Generally, commuter rails that go that distance have to have slightly different fare designs, use zone systems and other things. So we just didn't get to that level of detail, but we did assume a small amount of revenue coming from those.
That was actually the next question on the sheet. So
About what? Zone-based fares?
Is 20% fare box target for all new routes?
No, that's a good question. No, it's not. When we move the assumptions to, for example, a route that would be operated by SMART, we use SMART's baseline fare box recovery ratio, which is kind of between 10 to 15%. Same for DDOT, same for AAAT. So where we're working with a provider, we use their existing fare box recovery, which again, I believe is a conservative assumption to help them.
Could you explain what fare box recovery is?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, fare box recovery is so.
Could you
it's the
stand,
amount that
please?
people-
I think your voice would carry better.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. All right. I'll go for the mic here. Is this better?
Yes.
So fare box recovery is the amount of money that is used from passengers that pay fares to support the service. So cash, basically, when you get on the bus and it costs you $2, how much of that is going to support the service? 20% is a little above the national average for a bus-based system. Rail-based systems are generally a bit higher just because of the way they're designed. So that's about the average, 20%.
What is it?
The 80% comes from federal and state and local subsidies.
One more field.
Oh, okay.
How many new riders do you project per year?
Oh, man. So we haven't done extremely detailed ridership modeling on the entire system. We have looked at the BRT projects, or when we had projects on Woodward, Gratiot, and Michigan, and also on Washington Avenue in Ann Arbor. Largely, those were doubling to half again as much of riderships just on those routes alone. Once we move a little bit further, we can look at doing a little bit more modeling. I think it will go up quite a bit because once you start increasing especially frequency of services. So for example, on 15 Mile, right now the bus is operating every hour. So a bus is coming every hour past 15 Mile and Crooks, Coolidge. It goes up to every 15 minutes. You generally see quite an increase in the amount of people who are now willing to ride the service when those frequencies are going.
Okay, great. Is the plan getting support from local leaders? If not, what efforts are being done to obtain? And if county leaders don't support the plan, can local cities get service, i.e. Ferndale, Royal Oak, Berkeley, and Birmingham? So where we're at right now is we are in a listening session, and we are taking feedback from not only public but stakeholders and local and elected officials. And so I will reserve comment on that until after next 2 or 3 weeks, and we'll move forward with board action. As far as if county leaders don't support the plan, can local cities get service? That's one of the things that the RTA is looking at is, again, is this the right plan for the entire region? If it is, then that plan needs to be adopted. So from there, then we can talk about implementation. Could you provide more examples of hometown service? What details, types, costs, availability? Could you give us a sense of where this has been implemented in other metros, and again with examples? So the sort of example that I would use locally is the smart connector service. It's something that is done. They do a great job. It's a very popular service, but it's not, again, it's the communities that are opting in for, or that pay that portion of, that choose to purchase that service from Smart. And so this is something that, we're looking to provide for more of the communities, so that type of service can be expanded. Ben, you want to add something?
And I'm going to forget the exact name of it, but there is a similar program that is run in King County in Seattle. I believe it's called Community Connect, and it is a very similar service design in which the the regional operator there goes to the specific communities and talks to them about, what are your needs, and the feedback they've gotten in their area has been around a couple of things. One is increased flexible services for seniors and people with disabilities. The other is subsidizing van pools for commuter services, and that's something we've actually talked to some of the townships about, is just having a van pool service that helps people commute. So instead of running a bus up and down, getting people together under a van system. Another couple of things that I've seen people do is do park shuttles. So a lot of these communities, have large regional parks, so they often have traffic issues around major park times. So doing park-oriented shuttles is another thing we've seen. So we really took our cue from the SMART Community Partnership Program, and then this new program in the Seattle area to develop hometown service.
Next question. It looks like the process provides a single RTA member to vote no, thus keeping residents, voters from responding to a referendum. Can a single vote stop the process? So as I went through earlier, this is the process that is governed by not only the enabling statute for board action, but also by the RTA's bylaws. And so yes, this is the process that we will be following to to not only adopt the plan, but then also to consider a call for a referendum. This plan appears to find a nice middle ground for the opposed to a larger initial infrastructure investment while leaving the door open for growth and expansion. I believe this is a great starting point for our region. I'd like to see the anticipated environmental impacts noted for those of us interested in that. Also, what is the anticipated impact on roads throughout the counties? So, yeah, definitely, you know, some of these programs, with especially some of the capital, for example, the commuter rail from Ann Arbor to Detroit, we started that process doing the environmental impacts. That will need to be finished up. Any place where we spend federal dollars, we'll be doing that as we move forward if this plan is ultimately adopted. The impact on roads throughout the community. As Carly mentioned, this plan provides significant amount of funding on an annual basis to address choke points. And so those intersections, not only does the bus is able to move forward or move through that intersection more efficiently, but also traffic as well. And so that's a system. It modernizes one of those four key themes. We're modernizing the transportation system for the benefit of not only transit users but also road providers. I wish I could stand up here and say the plan also addresses every pothole and all the other roads needs. Again, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, but it does provide some ancillary benefits to the underlying road network as well. I need my reading glasses. Come up and read this one? Millennial. Yeah, millennial.
This is a question.
Yeah.
Current size of buses is excessive. Do you agree? People don't want to wait for bikes, wheelchairs, etc. when they are heading to work. Why not use shuttle-sized buses, not ones that cost $130 I'm sorry. Is someone in here who wants to read this? Or why not use millage to subsidize private enterprise mobility in Detroit? Aging areas argument doesn't acknowledge we old people won't get on buses. By the time we're old enough to relinquish driving, monetary and bus is impossible. Have you considered this? Why not start with corridor from Wayne to Washtenaw and see how that turns out? These are where millennials live, and they don't want to drive. If parking lots are going to be necessary with bus stops, why not start with finding and using money for those?
Good comments. Thank you.
Yeah.
In the plan, it mentions fixing the frequencies on 14 bus lines where passengers will not have to wait hours for a bus. Who will provide the RTA service? So in the frequent network service, in between Oakland, Macomb, and Wayne counties, is divided up between DDOT and SMART. And so those final determinations haven't been finalized yet. We actually, when we sat down and reviewed all the financial assumptions in the model with the transit providers, they had some suggestions about, we would like to take this route, we would like to take this route. Those types of agreements will be worked out through implementation, certainly in close coordination with the transit providers. But it will be provided, especially those frequent service corridors by the existing DDOT or SMART. The 85% compliance, does monies collected in Troy go back to Troy or Oakland County? So the 85% goes back to Oakland County. It's not individual communities within each respective county. Connect Southeast Michigan, 15 routes, 15 minutes. 15-minute service, 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., 7 days a week, or Monday to Friday. What do we include in our assumptions?
I think we have slightly reduced hours of operation and slightly reduced frequency on the weekends. I want to say we have 20 hours a week during the weekdays. I want to say we have 18 hours on Saturdays, 16 hours on Sundays, which is reflective of general usage on those weekends. So I think the traditional bus system will have a similar construct. I'd have to look again at the frequencies on the weekends. I think they're slightly less, but they might just be more even at like 20 minutes. So we can look and provide a little bit more detail on that.
Next one is what research have you done to justify a 15-minute service?
Sure. So 15-minute service is an industry standard for what we consider what I would call walk-up service. So a service where if you have appropriate stop amenities, which we're conceiving of in the plan, someone can walk up and reasonably be assured that a bus is going to come, and you don't have to time it and say, oh, if I miss it, I'm going to have to stay here for another hour. So that's kind of general industry understanding, and you'll see that again through most transit systems throughout the United States.
Got a couple more. What occupancy per ride does your research show for mid-morning, mid-afternoon rides?
Occupancy capacity?
Occupancy per ride.
So we do assume that on all the routes except for the major corridors, the 15-minute service goes to every half an hour, which is still about twice as much as what's out there today, because there is less need for service during those middle periods of time.
Is there a minimum cutoff for ridership to support a ride, or will rides run with one passenger?
No, there's not. I think the thing people have to understand about transit is that having it available to people, even though one person might be riding it, at a certain time of day, it's still a public resource that needs to be available for people if they need it, when, on these fixed routes during the times that it can be available. I also think there's a little bit of a fallacy when people see an empty bus, they don't necessarily see that that bus may have just dropped off a load of people at the mall or something along those lines. So the fixed route systems, we want to have them in place, and if sometimes during the day they're not as full, we can tune the service to match the need at those times.
And the last one for you, how are you going to reduce ridership, or do you think it will happen organically?
Sure, so I think the level of service will certainly, a little hot, okay. The level of service will certainly generate some organic ridership. We have been talking to the providers, and we'll continue to work with providers even if this doesn't pass, about how do we better engage with major employers, major services, both regionally and especially in the downtown area, regional services like entertainment venues, sports venues. How do we better market services and the ability for people to use those services to get to the existing downtown amenities or other amenities? So we've had some conversations with the providers about that, and we're going to continue to try and roll out a better marketing campaign around using the existing system.
Next question, will the Woodward line service downtown Royal Oak? So under the current plan, the Woodward line with the rapid service would serve downtown Royal Oak. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's in there. We can confirm that.
Yeah, let me look again. There was a split route.
Will the rural communities get 85% of their funds back through hometown service? Again, the 85% is calculated at a county by county level. When you say this plan will take our queue line operations, does that also mean that it will take on existing queue line debt? If so, what is the amount of that debt? So the only thing that's been included in the plan is the queue line operations beginning in 2027 and extending through the period of the 20 years. There is no queue line debt that this plan would be assuming. I appreciate the time your presentation's taken. The complexity is a huge undertaking and a necessary one. Is your PowerPoint available online? Thank you, and thank you for your attendance. That's more important, frankly. We will make this information available online, and again, you can view that, and there's more information as well, along with the survey. Can you explain what paratransit is? So paratransit is transportation that's provided, actually I don't know if someone wrote this down, but or they did, but for seniors and others who choose not to drive will need access to medical and social and community activities. It's a sort of on-demand response service that is currently provided in our region. Usually requires, do all the providers require a day of
Two-day booking.
two-day booking usually. A lot of regions are moving to same day. A lot of regions are implementing technology as well in order to get that service. So there's a lot of things, again, we're doing a good job at providing that service, but with additional resources, we think, one, that need is going to continue to grow, and then two, you know, there's things that can take that to that next level. You want to add anything to that? How would an airport express work? Where would it pick up and how often? I'm excited about the potential. Carly, I know you mentioned a couple of those services. You want to highlight that?
Sure. So there's going to be 4 airport express services, one running from Ann Arbor to Ypsilanti, and that'll run from Ann Arbor, downtown Ann Arbor to the airport. One in western Oakland County from Novi via I-275, that'll pick up at Toll Oaks Mall. Another one in Oakland County that will run via Dearborn. It'll start in Kayak at the Phoenix Center and end at the airport. And then the last one coming through Macomb. So coming from Macomb, starting at Lakeside Mall along M59, and then down 94 through downtown Detroit and across to the airport. Yeah, that's this one which starts up here, comes all the way down and then reaches the airport.
I've heard that the county executive and staff all worked on this plan for the last year and basically agreed to it. How did that happen? So there was, as I mentioned early on, there was a group of stakeholders that came together, including some of our region's elected officials, representatives. They did come together and identified some of the shortcomings of the 2016 plan. A lot of the elements that you see included came from the feedback that the RTA received, and which is being presented here. So I certainly will not speak for any of the county executives tonight. We'll let them do that, but I think a lot of the information that is included in the plan has a lot of the fingerprints on it, and you know, I think a lot of the rub is, you know, the implementation and how that gets moved forward. So I'll leave it at that. What is the cost of railway to Ann Arbor? What % of total cost of the plan is it? So if we have the percent of the plan, probably not off the top
I'm
of my
going to do
head.
it off the top of my head. It's not a lot though. I think it's fairly simple.
Yeah. Carly, you might be able to look the cost up, but if not, we can definitely. The other thing I should say is we've been collecting FAQs. So that's definitely a question that we will respond and put up on our website. We don't have the answer tonight. We'll get it up on our FAQs, so check back and look.
Just to add that real quick, as far as I understand, there's nothing in the RTA plan that actually necessarily precludes funding rail development in conjunction with anything else. So there is, Amtrak is improving service along their own routes, but that's a separate funding source. NDOT has the ability to work with either the RTA or Amtrak, and the federal government has the opportunity to work with either agency or either funding source. Is that correct understanding?
Yeah, that's correct. For those of you that may not have heard it, the question was whether or not there's anything that would preclude other operators, primarily Amtrak and funded through the Michigan Department of Transportation, from increasing service along the corridor, specifically Ann Arbor to Detroit. Amtrak is making improvements along the corridor. The Michigan Department of Transportation has recently invested significant money to upgrade the corridor from Kalamazoo to Dearborn. They do have the ability to add additional service, special event type service, but that is separate from this program. It's a separate funding pot through the Federal Railroad Administration. This is through the Federal Transit Administration. So two separate things, but still can move people. Why not start with phase one, staying within a budget you expect would be attained? Did Oakland offer a certain amount? Why do, so I think that's the first part of the question, and there's the second one. Yeah, that's an excellent comment. And so that's, again, two parts, try to keep them separate. Is the plan good for our region? And then how we go about implementing it. The second question, why does rail more expensive adjust the plan? Again, looking at all four, our member jurisdictions, the rail line has been a regional priority for parts of our region for a significant period of time. It has been included in the plan, and again, it's a regional plan, and so not everybody gets everything they want, and we may not agree with all components, but it's certainly, we feel it's moved the needle a long way from 2016.
Yeah, the Wayne County executive did proffer this plan, but Oakland County did proffer a plan for $1.2 billion over 20 years, and it was turned down by the other elected leaders.
So where is it?
It was actually given to the group at the meetings, and it was all the opt-in communities in Oakland County to be included in the district.
So the
Allow
RTA
them-
couldn't do it by law, can
Well,
they?
actually, there was a piece of legislation that was proffered by Oakland County and supported by Wayne County to change the district, and then Wayne County backed out of the deal before the bill was put
So
up.
why won't they release that publicly?
It has been.
Publicly.
But they declined to release it to public or media.
Who has declined?
Your office.
Actually, we've given the information out several times.
No.
To whom?
It is the opt-in communities for Oakland County to be included in the district, and the number is $1.2 billion over 20 years. We have the math, it's very simple.
That is all the comment cards that I have. I'll give one last chance. If not, we will be sticking around and answering any one-on-one comments. One second, and then we have also an opportunity to collect comments over here, the survey, as well as you can leave cards behind. So.
It was upsetting to me to hear someone say that they wouldn't benefit from this. I would like to give an example. I'm retired and working part-time in a grocery store, and I get complaints all the time. Why aren't there more people working here? And I also hear from the employer, we can't get people to work here. The problem is transportation. If we had transportation from the places where people live to the places where they need to work, you would have better services.
Can you give any more details about like the hometown service with regard to how you're thinking about economies of scale from the consolidation of the management and operation of those services? And then sort of follow up to that is there are a bazillion different like paratransit and interurban bus lines, some of which are privately operated, some of which are publicly operated. Is there any thinking that this would bring a substantial economy of scale in how that works, or is that
Yeah, definitely. Ben, you want to talk about some of your conversations, especially Northern Oklahoma?
Okay. So we've had general conversations about economies of scale, particularly when it comes to bus purchases, small bus purchases and other things like that. Nothing that we've looked at economically or mathematically, certainly just looking for where do some of the hometown service areas want to be able to partner, whether that be in terms of actually physically delivering service or purchasing additional vehicles. So we've had preliminary conversations about that.
So,
This gentleman here is waiting.
have you determined how much mileage you're going to cover with all these plans? Per month, I would like to know how many miles we're dealing with. Are we back to the moon, or?
I've never added that up. We can do it. We can add it up.
Right,
Yeah.
right, considering
Are you talking about the routes or just the entire service area?
the service that's going to be provided through this money, how is that going to impact on a mileage basis?
We can add that up.
I think you should.
Yeah. Yeah. Got it.
so do you have a timeline when you expect to have a plan together? I mean, how do you expect people to approve a plan where you don't know all the specifics yet for this amount of money? That's, as a resident 32 years, that's my big question.
The plan specifics are outlined in the room.
These aren't specifics. I want a specific financial breakdown. I want to know what the cost is for that railway, and I want to know what the percentage is. I want to know the specific cost of everything, because I work hard for my money. And if you don't have it at this late date, it's April, the end of April, and it's supposed to go on the ballot in November, and it's a $5.4 billion plan, I'm supposed to approve this?
Are you asking the same thing for NDOT?
Pardon me?
Are you asking the same thing at NDOT?
Right now, I'm at an RTA function, and that's what I'm focusing on.
It's all this, it's all, I mean,
Right now, I'm asking the question about this specific presentation.
That information has been and will be provided to our full board. It's been provided, and we'll provide additional more information on the financials as part of the presentation moving forward. Now, give a last question.
It's more of a comment. My name is Bill Galvin. I'm a former mayor from the city of Farmington, city council, and a candidate for Oakland County Commission. You know, the financial problems are what a lot of suburbanites are going to be looking at, and we're facing a lot of millages for roads and our own legacy costs. So I think one of the challenges that you need to identify if you want to get this through is how voters at the polls are going to make decisions between multiple millage increases in regional transit, as well as some of the benefits and services that they're on the city and township.
Yeah, that's certainly a priority. So, again, I've said it many times tonight, and I will continue to say it moving forward. This is the plan, and then there's the implementation piece. Whether this is the right time to move forward with multiple millage requests, multiple property tax requests for our region, that's for, frankly, this audience, as we move forward, the other audiences, and our board to decide. So, with that, I will close the comment. I thank everyone for coming out. Again, we'll stick around if there's other comments. This is the first of multiple meetings. Encourage you to spread the word, and thank you everybody for coming out.